Okay. Welcome everyone to today's second of a soon-to-be four-part series of Return to Play with two industry experts. We have with us today Mark Botterill, who is the VP of Strategy for Augusta Sportswear Brands, and Gary Goldberg, who is the CEO and founder of SquadLocker. And we had a wonderful conversation last month about the whole pandemic and the return to play and those types of issues and the things that we're mostly concerned about as members of this particular industry. And we've had hundreds of people sign up for these particular webinars and the things that we're trying to talk about. A couple of housekeeping discussions right now. We are recording this webinar. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A panel on your GoToWebinar platform. We are continuing the series with the help of the Return to Play Coalition, of which SquadLocker and Augusta Brands, and particularly Mark, is very, very involved. He's really helped me and SquadLocker point in the right direction on this Return to Play initiative. And just as a reminder, this particular webinar is a discussion. We're talking about things based on our knowledge. It's not supposed to represent any kind of legal and or medical advice. We're giving you the information that we know as of today. So just kind of keep that in mind. Feel free to ask questions. We're very open to answering as many questions as possible. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about guidelines, and during our rehearsal session yesterday, Gary suggested that we should do a fourth one and talk to maybe some mental health professionals that are really concerned about people not playing sports. And right before we got on this particular call, Mark had some insight about what are we going to do to get kids to be healthy. And Mark and Gary both talked about this, that there's a statistic out there that of the Fortune 500 CEOs, about 95% of them played some sort of sports in college, which is very interesting. Not everybody's going to be able to play sports in college. You're not going to have enough time or effort or whatever to be able to do it, but it's an interesting statistic. And then we wanted to kind of expand that. So Mark, why don't you talk a little bit about what you were talking about? What were you calling those Go Noodles? What was it about?
Oh, yeah, that was just something I think we were talking pre-call at some of the innovation around children's physical activity, and some of your listeners might want to go on the gonoodle.com is an app that's now being used in schools that is proving to be highly helpful in terms of kids' physical activity in school, but outside of a physical education class. But again, stressing, I think, that this need to be physically active to help physical and mental health. It's a gonoodle.com used around about 5,000 plus schools, if not more. But I think what's kind of interesting is globally 1.5 billion children are now out of school at the moment, and 99% of those children, 2 through 18, are under some kind of a restriction. And so what it's causing is a massive amount of anxiety, stress, and perhaps importantly, isolation. And one of the things I was struck by was UNICEF developed a book to support children called My Hero Is You, to address some of those stress and anxieties. But and if you have a chance to read that book, it might help at home. I did read it myself last week, but it's really underscoring the physical and mental health needs through activity and connectivity that sports bring. So to your point, Gene, and your question, and to you, Gary, I mean, I think these are becoming increasingly difficult times for children, and it's tough to count the cost. And sports is a solution to this challenge.
If you look at the slide that Gene put up, it's very telling. 9 reasons why you should hire athletes. Whether you hire these people or not, the process of learning and transitioning between child and adult, we all know how complex that is. But if you look at the inherent nature and characteristics of high-performing athletes, or even just people involved in sports, driven to achieve goals, they develop determination because they face obstacles. They become agile leaders because they're put in situations where they're needed to be. They understand strategy, teamwork, a sacrifice. It means choosing not to do something in order to prepare or practice. Never give up attitude, performance under pressure, motivation and commitment. I mean, those are great characteristics, and those are characteristics that will help you no matter what your challenges are in life. So it's so clear that when we think about education and kids who aren't in school right now, not only are they missing the math and the English and the reading and the writing, which is so valuable as well, but they're also missing this additional soft component, which help these 9 factors. So got to get kids back to school. We're going to do it safely.
We touched on this last time, Gene and Gary. I mean, I think if for your listeners that are involved in youth sports operations, the narrative of why sports is critical to participate in, right, is, I think, dramatically changing, or should be changing. We talked very little last week about, a couple of weeks ago, about the dream that's sold, whether it's playing for the Yankees or getting a college scholarship, albeit noble causes and worthy ceilings to try and reach for. If you're running sports today, this is a value proposition that you're going to have to fight, and you could be fighting, Xbox, you could be fighting the mall, you could be fighting all kinds of different opposition to youth sports participation. And we know that participation numbers, in some cases in soccer, it can be down as much as 75 to 80%. And most soccer agencies don't have a sales force, right, to go back and call people to have them come back and play. So the narrative, I think, has to change, that really radiates with the parent. The parent, in this case, is going to be a really important part of the proposition. That slide that we put together shows, I think, an incredibly important pathway of why the sports plays a massive role in leadership, but also the physical and mental well-being of children can be resolved in part, if not in more in part, through sport activity. There's a book, if anybody wants to try looking at the cognitive value of playing sports, especially in an early age, by a gentleman called Tom Byer, who is a specialist in developing soccer globally in the younger education, the younger player silo. And he has a foreword by John J. Ratty, who's an associate professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, who clearly spells out the cognitive relationship between playing sports and the brain development. And so, okay, a little bit technical, but the idea being is that to bring people back to sports, you're going to have
Hold on a second, Mark. I've got to wake myself back up. But go ahead.
The point being, I think, and maybe I'm overplaying that point, but the point being is that I think we're obliged here to change the narrative about why sports should be participated in.
And you've always talked about that. And we have a number of things to discuss in today's call. I wrote down the book name. I think that's pretty exciting. I wonder if we could get the author to do one of our webinars with us. But I wanted to move on to this next point. And Gary brought this up yesterday because we recently saw a study and that came out that said, gaiters or bandanas are not as good as masks, and what do you need to believe in? And Gary, you have a number of patents on textiles. You understand the science behind it, and there's a ton of media coverage. And this Save the Gators just came out yesterday talking about gaiters, and you can show us your gaiter right now.
Yeah,
and,
I wear one every day. I find them very easy to put on and take off when I'm not properly socially distanced. It's just something that's convenient, and I wear it around my neck. And in fact, my wife, who I love dearly, said, "I think that actually looks good on you, Gary. You should consider making that part of your wardrobe." So I like
the colors or something. So why don't you talk a little bit about this, because the media has scared people, and what are we trying to do here? We want people to be safe, and different styles mean different things, and we're hearing a lot about lanyards for masks, particularly for children in school, because just like any kind of uniform or sweatshirt or backpack or lunchbox, kids lose things all the time. And so what can we do? What should we believe, and how should we go about making sure that we understand the risks and the rewards of what we need to do?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I did want to touch on it because I want to demystify some of the hype and opacity around the subject. So just to think about it broadly, one, unfortunately, face coverings have become a political issue, and they really shouldn't be. I think, in my personal opinion, covering your face is a way for you to share with your immediate social community, I care about you. And because I care about you, I'm just going to do the right thing, which is to take small precaution and small inconvenience. And so for me, I don't find it political. I find it a symbol of caring, quite frankly. And it's part of our social contract that we should all be participating in, because you just don't know if someone around you could be immune compromised or, you know, have some pre-existing condition that you could unfortunately, through no fault of your own, hurt them. And so wearing a face covering right now is an indication that you care about people. Simply said, this idea of the shape of the covering, whether it be mask or gaiter, is not the right thing to be thinking about. The study said that some gaiters have a more porous fabric. Well, that may be true, but at SquadLocker, I think we're shipping a couple thousand individually decorated gaiters and face masks to all different people around the country on a daily basis. Some of the face masks are made out of the exact same materials as the gaiters. There's no difference. Single ply, stretch polyester. So the idea that a gaiter, because of its shape, is or isn't more effective than a face mask is, to me, just unscientific and silly. I have a patent in filtration, in a filtration fabric that I designed early on to help my son protect his lungs from dust mite waste for nighttime allergies. And there is this idea of the concept, the physical concept is called tortuosity. And that is the idea that there isn't a straight path between the front of the fabric and the back of the fabric in the form of a pore. And so the idea of layering fabrics is very effective. So I would just, as a scientist, say, hey, 2 layers is better than 1. 1 layer is better than none. And that's kind of how I would approach this whole mask, gaiter, bandana concept. But to say that a shape is or is not effective is actually time out, wrong subject matter. Because I probably could find a mask that's probably have a very porous fabric, that single layer, that if we really wanted to do some filtration tests, we would find is less effective in blocking something than a gaiter of a different fabric. So I think it's really about layers and fabric weight. And again, I think it's, you know, do no harm here. Put something on your face.
Yeah.
That's the first and most important step.
Cover your face.
Cover your face, Gene.
All right, let's get back to the athlete and talk about the athlete. And Mark, you mentioned this about the participation in any kind of a sport. It doesn't have to be a professional sport, college level, but just doing something has these known health benefits. But more importantly, there's a lot of uncertainty, and this is one of the things that you've been talking about with the Return to Play initiative. How do we get people to feel more comfortable about the concept of returning to play at this point? Mark.
Yeah, I mean, good questions. I just want to go back to Gary.
That was a big sigh, man.
No. I was actually absorbing Gary's.
My textile lecture put him to sleep.
There were words there that, from a Scrabble board perspective, were in the 1,000-point marks.
Tortuosity. It's a real word. You can look it up. I promise.
It's harmony to my ears, Gary. It really is. The question, I think, is a couple of answers to that. I think that the return to play process today is, for sports is certainly in jeopardy in some areas, and most of the people on the call know kind of where they're at today. I find it interesting that college football is sort of dictating some of this weather vane kind of approach as to whether it's the right thing or not the right thing to do. And interesting that the lawsuit today for Big Ten may actually potentially could overturn that. You've got collegiate players who sign waivers to hold the NCAA indemnable from concussion. Why could you do the same thing from a COVID perspective? And I think there's a big battle on that. But with that said, I think the sort of the parent that's sitting there, should I sign my 8-year-old up to play youth soccer in Nevada, is looking at the news and not getting great signs. And so it's incumbent, I think, today on the youth organizations to continue to drive the protocols and procedures that I think the Play Coalition has actually put together. It has had tremendous success in building trust with this document that can either be shared with the parent. These are the protocols and procedures that we're going to undertake. And in many cases, those have been hugely successful. I would point to volleyball as being a huge success in the discipline that they've focused on creating a safe and hygienic environment through the procedures that they put together. Indiana Volleyball Academy is a great example there. If anybody wants any help with being introduced into what they've done, their numbers are actually up year over year in most of their programs, partly tapping into the demand, but also the fact that they've provided a tremendously safe and very disciplined, hygienic environment to participate. And so I think the demand is clearly there. It's pent up. It's just a question of designing and earning the trust of the parents that you've done everything humanly possible to make that environment safe. So I think one of the things I would also advise your listeners to think about in this phase is also the role that if you go on an organization called Shape America, SHAP, Shape America, which is the PE sort of national governing body, working in conjunction with the physical activity coordinator in schools can pay huge dividends for your sports organizations. Those are schools that are in session, of course, but and being able to help them shape the PE classes to try and encompass your sports specificity, if you will, and help inspire children in behind those sports. And I think there's going to be a big play in trying to organize around the physical activity educators in schools to help develop that relationship between what can the schools inspire and how can you then harvest that inspiration. If you look at the USTA today, probably one of the most advanced participation programs of all sports. They have a very strong relationship with Shape America. They provide grants to schools in which if they promote school students to participate in their local programs, they provide grant programs to continue to build apparatus and equipment into the schools. In tennis's case, they ship in chalk to map out a field on blacktop and provide barrier tape and then some basic fundamental rackets and tennis balls that really help that. And that's proving to be a very simple and very cost-effective way to penetrate schools to inspire demand for your sport. So I think, again, working closely with physical activity teachers in schools to help you connect the dots with your local organization and your student population, super, super important. And then I'll just finish by saying this, Gene and Gary, I think we've got right now that 17 states are fully operational in terms of a go-forward plan to participate. With the Ohio governor yesterday or 2 days ago, allowing youth sports to continue. So I think you may see another 3 to 4, but certainly you're going to see some states that are pushing back against youth sports participation at the moment. But I think it's starting to win over this physical and health narrative. But good kudos to the Ohio governor for helping out today or yesterday on this.
He's been a big proponent of that. You know, I'm hearing anecdotally, Mark, from some of the people that we work with here at SquadLocker who still have young kids in sports that they're being told, drop your kid off and get out of here, parent. You're not welcome at the practice or at the games, but we're going to take good care of your kids. We're going to keep them, you know, safe. And I think it's actually an interesting dynamic for a bunch of reasons. One, it is a good way to keep people who are in an age group that are more susceptible from densifying around as an audience. The other probably other interesting thing that may come of this is, you know, the relationship between the child and the parent and the coach is a really complex dynamic. And
for sure,
when bringing up my 3 kids, I can't tell you how many times I saw parents trying to be the coach on the sideline. And it is so damaging for both the coach and the player, because there's this instinct to listen to your parent. There's this desire and instinct to listen to the coach, want to do right by, you know, whatever he or she is trying to execute on the field at the time. That's a really tough spot to put a kid in. So I think there may be this other silver lining that may happen where these kids actually get some independence in some of these situations.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good point. I think, again, when the narrative changes from this I'm investing in you in sports to get a college scholarship or to play for the Yankees, okay, I'm not suggesting that that's universal.
This Yankees thing is going to stop.
Yeah, Boston,
Red Sox, please.
I get that. I think once that angst out of the narrative, it'll help that relationship. I find it super interesting. In years gone by, there was some tremendous data produced for U.S. soccer around the women's soccer program, in which they, I'll get the numbers wrong here because I haven't written them down, but I'll just suggest this. The suggestion in women's youth soccer was that because the national team was so successful, they wanted to figure out what the development pathway was. And certainly what I'm going to describe is not the only success pathway, but the statistics said that of every woman that played on the U.S. women's national team, 78% of them had an older sibling. Of those had a sibling, excuse me, 78% had a sibling. And 69% of those siblings were older. And the average age difference was 3.1 years between the older sibling and the player that played on the national team. And the further research basically said that the development of playing against older players in pickup play and house play and schoolyard play was a significant advantage to allowing the child, or in this case, the women's national team player, to be able to develop skills, not uncoached, I'm not suggesting that in any way, shape, or form, but allowed to be able to rough and tumble and get out and play and scrape the knee and to be challenged. And that parent allowing that to happen in and around school, in and around the schoolyard, in and around their backyard is a very, very successful development process, and allowing that to happen and to intermingle players and not pigeonhole into certain age groups and give it too much structure.
What an interesting insight, Mark. This is exactly what happened in my family. We have 3 kids, boy, girl. Oldest boy was in the 8th grade. They needed a goalie for their lacrosse team. They commandeered at the time, 5th grade, 6th grade boy, hey, go have mom get you a goalie stick. We're going to make you the goalie, because they didn't have a goalie. Well, would you know that stretched that 5th, 6th grader? He aspired to be with the older kids. He tried twice as hard because there was so much at risk for him. He definitely scraped but bit his bottom lip for fear of looking like I couldn't do it. And he became an all-state goalie and now plays in college. And had it not been for his older sibling saying, hey, tell mom to go get you a stick, we need a goalie, and that gap, it would have never happened.
Yeah. So you live that process. And I think, again, most of your listeners who run sports programs like I have in the past are so scared out of the wits in involving parents, right? Because parents just haven't, certain parents have just not been in check with the way that they've dealt with their kids. And in many cases, I think we've all felt that they've been detrimental. But I don't think that's the case moving forward. I think if you look at some of the global players, I go back to soccer where I'm familiar with it, you look at some of the key leading players today, there's been a tremendous involvement from the parents' participation, either just being there shoulder to shoulder, either being there to allow them to participate and in the backyard or in the basement, but being there romantically connected in a very positive way. You look at Christian Pulisic today, probably one of the top 3 players in the world. His father played a massive role in that. You look at Lionel Messi, probably the best player in the world. Again, father played a massive role in the development. So parents can be hugely influential, and they're going to be needed to be a great advocate moving forward because of the challenges and the barriers of participating in sports. And we need those parents. We need those parents to be a positive influence.
We certainly do.
So you guys are awesome being able to talk about some of these things. And so the slides that I built were all for naught. And, and so I'll just kind of cover a little bit of these things that we talked a little bit about, some of the high risk sports, which we would imagine that are going to be, they're going to be in right next to each other. We're not going to be able to have social distancing. Some of the moderate risk sports that we see here, and then more of the low risk sports. And I think one of the things, I was a cheerleader in high school, so sideline cheer, that would be me, but my mouth was so big that I probably blasted the bleachers, so I'd have to wear a mask. But why don't we talk a little bit about this? I know, Mark, before, when we talk about the COVID and getting people back into it, there's a lot of people that are very concerned about it. But when we talk about the individual sports, there's a lot of things that we're seeing right now. Both you and Gary are seeing that there's sports, there's entire seasons that are flip-flopping. And you have mentioned it a number of times in terms of there's going to be people that are doubling, tripling up on their sports. There's going to be an open sports season. Why don't you talk about that a little bit more and maybe kind of address it for some of our people that are on the call today to be able to talk about what are some of the challenges, but also some of the solutions that you're seeing schools and sports organizations do right now.
That's a tough question, and I'll sort of kick it to Gary here in a little bit.
Sorry
But
about
I think,
that.
no, I mean, I think one of the things, solutions. Let's talk about solutions for your listeners who are listening in. One of the things I'm seeing change very dramatically, and I think it's a good thing, is people are getting away from traditional seasons. Right, soccer runs in the fall, runs in the spring. I'm seeing people pivot towards a subscription. So it's a 12-month subscription to participate. We're going to run programming year round. We're not going to emphasize that you should play soccer all your life. We want to make sure that you get into other sports. But if you want to stay with soccer tuition and soccer games, if they're lighthearted games, they don't have to be a gaming circuit. Let's go to a subscription model. Is it $50 a month? Is it $30 a month? And here I'm talking about a more of a recreational and participation levels. Clearly, the elite players have something similar to that at the moment. But I think you're finding people addressing some of the concerns around accessibility and continuation of the programs. Is nothing worse than a season ending for a kid and then having to wait 3 months for it to start again, right? It's not actually logical today, I don't think. Now, that doesn't mean to say they can't go off and play a different sport and that they have to participate. And certainly you can cut your subscription, but I'm seeing programs that just build in a subscription model so that if people want to maintain physical activity through soccer, that would be perfectly fine. And I think you're also seeing, and Gary and I've talked about this at length, that a lot of organizations that are sport specific are now becoming multi-sport organizations. And those of you in Virginia, you'll probably know that because they've been the lead state behind that.
But yeah, are you seeing the change in the demand of specific uniforms at Augusta and the other brands that support, whether it's Pacific Headwear or High Five or whatever? I mean, like we're seeing like total upside down demand for more garments that can be used for more than one thing.
Sure. 100%.
So whether it's a reversible penny or it's just this like moisture management 2-color top that, hey, that could be a soccer jersey, that can be a baseball jersey, that can be a volleyball jersey. Sure. We're seeing the whole thing kind of blend right now, and having the other thing we're seeing too is we thought we were on hold, we're not on hold. Right. We needed it.
Right. We're ready to go.
Yeah, it's banana.
I think that one of the things I think that obviously this serves your purpose, and I don't mean to sort of bring up things that serve our purpose, but I think you're going to find universal uniforms are going to be critical, and sublimation in one-ply reversible is a tremendous innovation. You're not talking about the old reversible that has 2 pieces of fabric that are sewn together and has plastisol on your back, et cetera, but I think the one-ply reversible that can be multi-use and used, for 2 years and year-round, and can provide a sub-community passion connectivity. Right? It doesn't have to be a brand. It can be, a palm tree if you're in Palm Springs. It can bring in the local community flavor. But I 100% agree with you, Gary. I think some of the innovations are. I don't think you're going to be distributing uniforms in bulk. I don't think volunteers are going to be taking their uniforms and sticking in the garage and hoping to hand them out hand to hand. I don't see that in the future.
We're seeing a huge demand for our direct-to-player solution where we're just
and I think you've been an innovator in that process, and we applaud you for that. I think you're going to be seeing uniforms that are going to be multi-purpose and multi-usage. I think you're going to find the reversible coming back in vogue because it's one less garment people have to look for, but now with the implication that the innovation of a one-ply piece that's lightweight and doesn't have exterior printing on it, potentially could be hugely successful. So I think there are a number of innovations, and I think the starter kits that you actually put together from multiple brands is super important because these seasons I think can be truncated. I know a lot of the soccer guys that I know are going to try and play 3 seasons in 21 if they can. So, you again, getting back to universal programs. And we're seeing sports like lacrosse and certainly youth football like Pop Warner probably now going to play in January and may play 2 seasons, potentially 3 seasons if they play in the summer as well. So that axis of youth sports has really changed, and I think it's in some cases good, right? I think it's a re-innovation.
I agree with that.
One thing I wanted to touch on with you, Gary, so that we're,
Yes,
and
sir.
Gene, if it's okay, is to be resonant. One of the things that we put a lot of work in, and I hope I can catch everybody's attention, are things that can help children and families pay for their uniforms and their registration fee. And there's a couple of companies that we've been working with. If you want, at some point in time, those that are listening, to look at companies like Tap and Pay and Flip and Give. These are, and Rally.org. These are folks who are super busy at the moment, but they're finding ways to try and underwrite children's participation in youth sports through various different programs of support in your buying trends, right? And so if you want to take a look at some of those programs, and if there's some resonance to that, I'm sure I can give Gary, and Gary knows some of these people anyway, it's a mobility. There's a company called Leagueside, LEAGUESIDE, that is doing a tremendous amount of work in finding local sponsors and organizations to underwrite children's participation also. And good folks there that I know Gary's has a relationship with, is building a relationship with.
Excellent
and
feedback.
So we can be helpful in finding capitalization to offset costs and help children through investment like that. So those are some of the companies that we don't have a business interest in them, of course, but people that we know we've worked with that have done really good things for the community, and I would advise that they could be helpful.
Excellent, Mark.
Okay. We have one question right now. If anybody else has any questions for Gary or Mark, I want to honor everyone's time. We're slightly over the 30-minute mark. Adam had a question. Where do you consider flag football among the risk levels? Because if you go back, I think I had low risk sports here, and then moderate, and then high risk. And I don't have anything on flag football. What do you guys think?
I think it's an awesome alternative to touch football right now, and I think it can be done safely. And in fact, the school that my kids went to is looking at setting up an intra-school flag football league, because their contact football is not going to play, I don't believe, have a chance to play interscholastically. So I think flag is cool. I know, Mark, at Augusta, you guys have a huge relationship with that National Flag Football Organization. I can't remember the name of it. You can obviously correct me by giving that, but I think flag is where it's at. I also think it's an awesome sport too. So it's, low contact, it's low concussion, and it's a ton of fun.
Good points, Gary, and I agree with you. NFL flag, but flag football surpassed tackle football for the first time last year in just over 1 million participants. But there's some good folks that run the flag programs like USA Football, NFL Flag. It's an art form. I almost look like NFL Flag is that sort of empty swimming pool for skateboarders, right? It just became a canvas for them to express a more artistic way of playing football. And as such, because of its sort of its innovation in terms of allowing kids to express themselves, 6 through 10-year-olds now is the highest growth area, in particular girls. I don't think it threatens other sports participations. I think it's a complement. And I think folks like the NFL flag have done, a company called Reigning Champs that runs it, have done some tremendous innovative things. They alone have pre-COVID, about 550,000 kids participating. And so if I'm a youth organization looking for perhaps opportunities to offer more sports or different sports to keep that family as a member of my organization, I would consider looking at flag initiatives to operate. And because there's not a lot of coaching involved, I'm probably going to get shot down here by an NFL coach, but flag coach. But there's a lot of freedom in flag, and there's a lot of art form to the game versus more of the physical nature of tackle.
That's fantastic. I don't see
can't
any
wait
other
to get a note from Pete Rizal saying or something. don't be putting down flag football. But
both so knowledgeable, and we totally appreciate everything that you've been able to talk about, and you have such a nice conversation together. We appreciate everything that you're doing for us, and we look forward to number 3, which will be next month on September 24th. And we will be talking about innovation and technology, because there's a lot of important parts of this. And we can use some of those organizations that you brought up, Mark, and possibly be able to share them with our audience. So thanks, everybody. You will be getting a copy of the recording. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Gary,
Thanks,
for being
Jean.
such awesome guests. We really
Bye,
appreciate
Mark.
it.
See you, buddy.
See you, Gary. Thanks for the chat. Love it.
Take care.
See you guys. Take care, everybody. Best of luck to everybody.